My name is Marta Morrison, and what I'm about to share with you changed my life forever. On September 15th, 2019, I didn't just have a brush with death. I actually died for 21 minutes and 37 seconds. During that time, Jesus Christ himself revealed to me shocking truths about the mark of the beast that I was commanded to share with the world. What I learned will shake you to your core. But before I tell you about the incredible revelations I received, I need you to understand how I got there. That crisp Sunday morning started like any other. The autumn air carried the first hints of fall, and golden leaves danced in the gentle breeze as I drove to my grandson's baptism. St. Michael's Church had been my spiritual home for over 3 decades, and I knew every curve and bend of County Road 16 leading there. The old miller's farm stood as a familiar landmark, its weathered barn a testament to simpler times. I remember thinking how perfect the weather was for such a blessed occasion. My heart was full of joy, anticipating the moment my grandson would be welcomed into God's family. I had spent the previous evening preparing a special family Bible as a gift, inscribing it with verses about God's faithfulness through generations. If only I had known then how prophetic those verses would become. The last memory I have of that morning is glancing at my watch, 9:17 a.m., and noting that I would arrive early enough to help with the final preparations. Then, everything changed in an instant. I later learned that a drunk driver, having been awake for over 24 hours, had crossed into my lane. The impact was devastating, but God had a purpose even in this tragedy. What seemed like an ending would become a divine appointment, one that would reveal crucial truths about the times we're living in and the choices that lie ahead. The transition from life to death happened faster than a heartbeat. One moment I was gripping my steering wheel, and the next, I found myself suspended above a scene of controlled chaos. 2 fire trucks and an ambulance had already arrived, their emergency lights casting an otherworldly glow across the morning mist. The first thing that struck me was the silence, not a complete absence of sound, but rather a muffling of the world below, as if I was hearing everything through layers of thick glass. I watched with an inexplicable calm as paramedics worked frantically over my crumpled car. They were using the jaws of life to cut through the driver's side door, their movements precise despite the urgency of the situation. I could see my body inside, slumped over the steering wheel, but felt strangely detached from it, like watching a movie of someone else's life. "BP's dropping. We need to get her out now," one paramedic shouted, his voice reaching me as if through water. I wanted to tell them not to worry, that I felt no pain, no fear. In fact, I felt more peaceful than I had ever experienced in my 63 years of life. The constant ache in my left knee that had bothered me for decades was gone. The reading glasses I always needed were no longer necessary. I could see everything with perfect clarity. That's when I noticed something extraordinary about the accident scene below. Time seemed to flow differently. I could focus on individual moments, stretching them out like pulled taffy, or watch several minutes pass in what felt like seconds. I saw my grandson's baptismal gift, the family Bible I had carefully wrapped in white paper, floating through the air in slow motion as it was ejected from the passenger seat, its pages fluttering like dove's wings before settling in the grass beside the road. Then came the light. It began as a pinpoint in what I can only describe as an upward direction, though earthly directions seemed meaningless in this state. The light grew larger, or perhaps I was moving toward it. It was impossible to tell. Unlike any light I'd experienced before, it had substance, texture, and most remarkably, consciousness. It seemed to be reaching out to me, calling me home. The light formed what appeared to be a tunnel, though that word feels inadequate to describe it. The walls, if you could call them that, were composed of living light that moved and shifted in patterns that somehow conveyed meaning. I felt understanding flowing into me, though not in words or even concrete ideas. It was as if I was remembering things I had always known, but had somehow forgotten during my time on Earth. As I moved through this space of living light, I became aware of a presence beside me. Turning, though I had no physical body to turn with, I saw my grandmother Martha, exactly as she looked in the summer of 1962 when she taught me to make her famous apple pie. She was wearing her favorite blue gingham dress, her silver hair caught up in its usual neat bun, and her eyes sparkled with that special mix of wisdom and mischief I remembered so well. Grandmother. I tried to speak, but no words came out. None were needed. She smiled, and in that smile was every summer morning we'd spent together, every lesson she'd taught me, every moment of love we'd shared. She was younger than I was now, vibrant with life and joy. She didn't speak, but her presence conveyed a clear message. Everything is exactly as it should be. Other presences began to appear as we moved through the tunnel. My childhood friend Sarah, who had died of leukemia when we were both 12, my father looking strong and healthy as he had before the cancer took him, and most surprisingly, little Jamie, my first grandchild who had lived only a few hours after birth. He wasn't a baby now, but appeared as a young man, radiating love and joy. Each of these encounters felt like both an instant and an eternity, and each added to the growing certainty that what I was experiencing was more real than anything I had known in my earthly life. The tunnel journey defied all earthly physics. We moved without moving, traveled without distance, and experienced time without its passage. Colors I had never seen before danced at the edges of my awareness. Colors that made earthly rainbows seem pale and limited in comparison. Music filled every part of my being, but calling it music is like calling the ocean a puddle. It was the sound of reality itself, the harmony of existence, the very voice of love. I became aware of my own consciousness expanding. Memories long forgotten surfaced with crystal clarity. Not just events, but the feelings, smells, and complete sensory experiences of moments throughout my life. I remembered the exact taste of my mother's sugar cookies from Christmas 1965, the precise feeling of my husband's hand when he first held mine at the county fair in 1973, the complete sensation of holding each of my children for the first time. But these weren't just memories. They were somehow present, immediate, all existing simultaneously in this eternal moment. As we approached what seemed to be the end of the tunnel, the light intensified. Rather than becoming uncomfortable, it felt increasingly familiar, like returning to a home I didn't know I had. The space opened into what I can only describe as an expanse of infinite dimensions. Earthly geometry and physics simply don't have the vocabulary to explain what I experienced. It was as if every possible reality existed simultaneously, yet all were one perfect whole. That's when I saw him. Jesus Christ stood before me, though stood implies a physical limitation that wasn't present there. His presence was everywhere, in everything, yet also specifically focused and personal. He appeared simultaneously as the humble carpenter of Nazareth and the glorified King of Kings. His love radiated with such intensity that it would have vaporized my earthly body, yet here it felt like the most natural thing in existence, like air to lungs that had been holding their breath for a lifetime. His appearance shifted and changed, not like a flickering image, but like an infinite unfolding of reality. One moment, he was as human as any person I'd ever met, with eyes that held depths of understanding and compassion I had never imagined possible. The next moment, he was pure light and energy, more brilliant than 1,000 suns, yet completely approachable. Both appearances were equally true, equally him, and I understood that my limited earthly consciousness was simply incapable of perceiving his full reality all at once. In his presence, I became aware of my own spirit in a way I never had before. I could see how every choice I'd ever made, every person I'd touched, every prayer I'd uttered had created patterns in the fabric of reality. Nothing had been wasted, Nothing had been lost. Even my smallest acts of kindness had rippled out in ways I'd never imagined, touching lives I'd never known. At the same time, I could see where my failures and fears had created shadows, where I had missed opportunities to show love or share truth. Yet even these were encompassed by his overwhelming love and had somehow been woven into his greater purpose. "Marta," he communicated, not through words, but through direct understanding that bypassed language entirely. "What you are about to witness must be shared. My children must be warned and prepared for what is coming." Suddenly, I was immersed in a series of visions so vivid and detailed that they made our earthly reality seem like a pale shadow. Jesus showed me how the implementation of the mark of the beast would unfold in ways few expect. The deception would be far more subtle and insidious than most Christians anticipate. I witnessed how current technological systems were merely laying the groundwork. Digital currencies, biometric identification, and social credit systems. These were just the preliminary stages. The true mark would be far more comprehensive, combining economic, social, and spiritual control in ways that would make resistance seem not just difficult, but almost irrational. Jesus revealed how the system would be marketed as the solution to humanity's greatest challenges: economic inequality, climate change, social division, and even religious conflicts. It would promise to unite humanity under one system that would ensure fair distribution of resources, universal access to services, and global peace. The deception would be so convincing that even many religious leaders would advocate for it. I saw how artificial intelligence and quantum computing would evolve to create a system of total surveillance and control. But these technologies themselves weren't the mark. They were merely tools that would make its implementation possible. The actual mark would require a conscious choice to pledge allegiance to the Antichrist system and reject God's sovereignty. What struck me most was seeing how social pressure would be used to enforce compliance. Those who refused the mark would be portrayed as extremists, conspiracy theorists, and enemies of social progress. The media would run countless stories about people whose lives were ruined because they refused to participate in the new system. Families would be torn apart as members pressured each other to accept the mark for their own good. Jesus showed me specific events that would lead to the mark's implementation. Global economic crises, environmental disasters, and social upheavals would create such chaos that people would beg for a solution, any solution. When the system was finally revealed, it would seem like an answer to prayer, but it would require selling one's soul. I witnessed how underground networks of believers would form, supporting each other through the persecution. These communities wouldn't be based on fear, but on love and faith. They would find creative ways to survive outside the system, though it would mean living as outcasts from mainstream society. Then Jesus revealed something that broke my heart. I saw people I knew, faithful Christians who had attended church their whole lives, accepting the mark because they hadn't prepared spiritually for the deception. They had focused so much on physical preparation that they neglected to build the spiritual discernment needed to recognize the true nature of the choice they faced. The vision shifted to show me current events that are aligning with these future scenarios. I saw how the pandemic had accelerated the push toward digital systems and normalized the idea of showing proof of status to participate in society. I witnessed how social media was conditioning people to accept constant surveillance and social scoring. These weren't the mark itself, but they were conditioning people to accept what would come. Jesus emphasized that while technology would play a crucial role, the mark would ultimately be a spiritual choice. It would require explicitly acknowledging the Antichrist as Lord and rejecting Jesus Christ. There would be no way to accept it accidentally or under duress. It would require a conscious decision to choose temporary earthly comfort over eternal salvation. I was shown how some believers would be called to martyrdom, while others would be supernaturally protected and provided for. Each person would have their role to play in God's plan, and He would give the necessary grace for whatever path He chose for them. The vision concluded with scenes of Christ's return and ultimate victory. While the time of the mark would be terrible, it would be relatively brief. Jesus emphasized that His return was certain and that those who remained faithful would be vindicated and rewarded beyond anything they could imagine. When I felt myself being pulled back to my body, I was filled with an urgent sense of mission. The doctors later told me that I had been clinically dead for 21 minutes and 37 seconds. But I knew that time had been divinely appointed. Every second was necessary to receive the warning I was meant to share. Since that day, I've observed how rapidly our world is moving toward the scenarios Jesus showed me. The increasing push toward digital identity systems, the growing social pressure to conform to new ideologies, and the subtle conditioning of people to accept ever greater control over their lives. It's all exactly as He revealed. I share this testimony not to create fear, but to encourage preparation and faith. Jesus showed me that while difficult times are coming, He will never abandon those who stay true to Him. His grace will be sufficient for whatever challenges lie ahead. The mark of the beast is coming, but so is Christ's return. Now is the time to prepare, spiritually, mentally, and practically. May this testimony strengthen your faith and resolve to stand firm, no matter what comes.